gentleman who determined to become a billionaire by the age of 40 found that such a wish could not be achieved at the age of 35. So he gave up his job and started a business, hoping to become rich overnight. In the past 5 years, he has opened a travel agency, a coffee shop, and a flower shop. Unfortunately, he failed every time he started his business, and his family was in dire straits. His exhausted wife was unable to persuade him to return to the workplace. In desperation, she ran to seek help from eminent monks. After understanding the situation, the eminent monk said to his wife, "If your husband is willing, please invite him to come. Although this gentleman is here, it can be seen from his eyes that he is here just to perfunctory his wife." Without saying a word, the eminent monk took him to the courtyard of the temple, which was about the size of a basketball court. The courtyard was full of dense, century-old trees. The eminent monk picked up a broom from under the eaves and said to the gentleman, "If you can sweep the fallen leaves off your yard, I'll tell you how to make billions." Although he didn't believe it, seeing the seriousness of the eminent monk and the temptation of hundreds of millions, the gentleman thought it would be difficult to sweep the courtyard. So he took the broom and started sweeping the floor. An hour later, he finally swept from one end of the courtyard to the other. Seeing that he had finally finished sweeping, he picked up the dustpan and turned back to pick up the fallen leaves that had just been swept into piles. However, he saw that there were more fallen leaves falling on the ground that he had just swept. Leaves all over the ground. Annoyed, he had to speed up sweeping the floor, hoping to catch up with the falling leaves. But after a day of trying, there were just as many fallen leaves on the ground as when we first arrived. The gentleman threw away the broom angrily and ran to the eminent monk to ask why the eminent monk was making fun of him like this. The eminent monk pointed to the leaves on the ground and said, "Desire is like the endless fallen leaves on the ground, covering up your patience layer by layer. Patience is the voice of wealth. You have 100 million desires in your heart, but you only have the patience for one day. Like the fallen leaves in autumn, you have to wait until all the leaves have fallen in winter before they can be swept away, but you want to sweep them all in one day." After that, the couple was invited to go back. Before leaving, the eminent monk told the gentleman that in order to repay him for his hard work in sweeping the floor today, they would pass by a barn on their way home. There would be 100 bags of rice packed in linen bags, each bag weighing 100 kilograms. Heavy. If the husband is willing to help him move the rice outside the barn, there will be a door behind the rice pile with a treasure box inside. In it is gold donated by good men and women. The amount is not very large. Just think of it as your help today. Remuneration for sweeping floors and moving rice. After walking for a while, the couple saw a barn with rice piled neatly about 2 stories high, exactly as the monk had described. For the sake of gold, the gentleman began to move the rice out of the warehouse one by one. A few hours later, when he was almost finished moving, he saw that there was really a door at the back. He opened the door excitedly. There was indeed a treasure box inside. There was no lock on the box. He opened the treasure box easily. His eyes lit up. There was a small sack in the treasure chest. He picked up the sack and untied the rope. He reached in and grabbed a handful of things. But what he caught in his hand was not gold, but a handful of small black seeds. He thought perhaps they were used to protect the gold, so the contents of the bag were dumped on the ground. But to his disappointment, there were no gold nuggets on the ground, only a pile of black seeds and a piece of paper. He picked up the piece of paper and it read, "There is no gold here." The deceived gentleman threw the sack in his hand against the wall in disappointment. He turned angrily and opened the door to leave. However, he saw Gao Sheng standing outside the door, holding a handful of seeds in his hands, and said softly, "What did you just say?" The hundreds of bags of rice that were moved were all grown from this small bag of seeds in 4 months. Your patience is not as good as a grain of rice seed. How can you hear the sound of wealth?